James Miller only wanted to cheer for his son, while Daniel Brooks came to see his nephew play. But what began as a simple youth football game between the Oakville Tigers and the Brookside Hawks ended with blood on the field, a body in the hospital, and an entire community torn apart. The day began with sunshine spilling across the town's largest park, where families gathered for what should have been a cheerful youth football game. Children in brightly colored uniforms stretched on the field, their helmets gleaming under the light. Parents unpacked folding chairs and coolers, ready for an afternoon of snacks, laughter, and spirited cheering. The smell of popcorn and grilled hot dogs drifted through the air, blending with the sound of whistles and chatter. For many, it was the highlight of the weekend, a chance to see their children play, bond with neighbors, and escape the worries of everyday life. The Oakville Tigers and the Brookside Hawks were facing off, two teams with a history of rivalry that stretched back several seasons. Their matches always drew the largest crowds, and today was no different. From the moment the players ran onto the field, it was clear that this game carried more weight than most. The bleachers were filled to capacity, and latecomers stood behind the fence, craning their necks for a better view. There was excitement in the air, but hidden underneath was a restless energy that most people ignored. Some parents spoke in hushed tones about previous games, recalling heated arguments, disputed calls, and even threats exchanged between rival families. Others laughed nervously, brushing off the tension as part of competitive spirit. Yet the intensity of the stares between the two sides suggested that something more was brewing. On the sidelines, the coaches paced restlessly, eyes darting not only to their players but also toward the opposing bench. Small disagreements over practice times, referee selections, and even parking arrangements had created friction long before the game began. Now, with the children lined up on the field, all those frustrations simmered just beneath the surface. No one expected disaster, but there was a quiet sense that the day could easily shift from joy to conflict. As the first whistle blew, the crowd roared with excitement, completely unaware that within hours the cheers would turn to screams. The crisp green field, the banners hanging proudly from the fences, and the smiling children running across the grass gave the illusion of safety. It felt like a perfect Saturday. But beneath the celebration lay the spark of something darker, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The game opened with explosive energy as the young athletes sprinted down the field, their small bodies colliding with surprising force. Every completed pass, every tackle, and every run was met with cheers that rattled the metal bleachers. Parents clapped, whistled, and shouted the names of their children, but their enthusiasm carried a sharp edge. The Oakville Tigers surged forward early, and the Brookside Hawks scrambled to catch up. With each play, tension thickened, clinging to the air like humidity before a storm. The referee's whistle pierced through the chaos, but even his commands seemed powerless against the growing unease. The first few minutes were innocent enough, filled with excitement and determination. But after a questionable call by the referee, the mood shifted. A touchdown that appeared valid to one side was overturned, sparking a wave of frustration among the Hawks' parents. Shouts rose from the stands, some accusing the referee of bias, others muttering that the Tigers always seemed to benefit from questionable decisions. The referee tried to wave it off, keeping his eyes locked on the game, but the noise only grew louder. Then came the play that cracked the fragile sense of order. A Hawks player collided head-on with a Tigers runner, sending both boys sprawling to the ground. One lay motionless for a few seconds before slowly pulling himself up, his face twisted in pain. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed quickly by anger. Parents from both sides surged to their feet, pointing fingers, shouting accusations of dirty play, and demanding penalties. The children themselves were frightened, looking at one another in confusion, unsure if they had done something wrong. The referee signaled for calm, but the bleachers erupted into a frenzy. Some parents yelled to pull their children off the field, while others shouted for harsher punishments. Coaches paced the sidelines, their voices raised in heated arguments over what had really happened. What should have been a minor incident transformed into a flashpoint that exposed months of resentment. As the game pressed forward, the atmosphere felt poisoned. Every whistle was met with boos or cheers, depending on who benefited. The line between encouragement and hostility blurred, and the sidelines became a battleground of words. It was no longer about the children playing. It was about pride, rivalry, and grudges too deep to ignore. The match that had begun as entertainment was quickly sliding towards something far more dangerous, and no one seemed capable of stopping it. The tension that had been simmering finally erupted when the referee made a call that would decide the outcome of the match. The Brookside Hawks believed they had scored the winning touchdown, but the referee's whistle cut through the cheers, signaling that the play was invalid. For a moment, the field froze in disbelief. Then chaos broke loose. Parents poured from the bleachers, shouting in rage, their voices colliding into a wall of noise. Coaches stormed toward the referee, their faces red with anger, jabbing fingers in protest. The children, bewildered and frightened, huddled together on the sidelines, their earlier excitement replaced with tears and confusion. A swarm of parents rushed onto the grass, some demanding the game continue, others demanding it end immediately. The referee's attempts to restore order went unheard as the volume of shouting drowned out every word. The energy shifted from frustration to fury in seconds. People shoved each other, arguments turned into physical confrontations, and the sound of chairs crashing against the ground echoed across the field. The peaceful Saturday afternoon was collapsing into something violent and uncontrolled. A single shove ignited the first fight. Two fathers, both defending their teams, clashed at the 50-yard line, their fists swinging wildly. Others jumped in either to separate them or to take sides, and the melee expanded like a storm, spreading across the field. Drinks spilled, banners ripped, and terrified children were pulled away by panicked mothers. What began as a community sporting event had now dissolved into a battlefield. Some parents attempted to restrain the more aggressive individuals, but the crowd had lost all sense of reason. The sound of flesh striking flesh, the cries of fear, and the desperate shrieks of children filled the air. The referee dropped his whistle and backed away, realizing he had lost control of the game and the crowd. People who had arrived with smiles and snacks were now locked in a frenzy of violence. The grass was torn beneath stomping feet, the sidelines littered with abandoned equipment, and the once joyful field became unrecognizable. In the midst of the chaos, someone reached for their phone to call the police, but by the time authorities were contacted, the situation had spiraled far beyond an ordinary brawl. What was once a children's football game had now transformed into a full-scale riot, and it was only the beginning of the nightmare. Police sirens pierced the air as the chaos continued to unfold on the football field. By the time the flashing lights appeared at the edge of the park, the damage had already gone far beyond what anyone had expected. Parents were scattered across the grass, some injured and others still screaming, their voices raw with rage and fear. The officers pushed their way through the crowd, shouting commands, but the scene was too large and too chaotic to bring under control immediately. The once vibrant field was a mess of overturned chairs, trampled food stands, and equipment scattered like debris after a storm. Near the bleachers, a man lay unconscious, his head bleeding heavily after being struck by what appeared to be a large water cooler. People crowded around him, some attempting to help, others backing away in shock. Only a few feet away, another parent clutched his side, staggering as blood seeped through his shirt from a sharp wound. The realization spread quickly this was no longer just a fight. Weapons had been used, and what had started as a game had transformed into a violent crime scene. Mothers screamed for their children, pulling them toward the parking lot, desperate to escape. The kids who had come to play football stood frozen, their wide eyes reflecting the horror of what they had witnessed. The officers moved quickly, separating people and restraining the most aggressive individuals. Several were handcuffed on the spot, still shouting accusations as they were dragged away. The referee sat slumped near the sideline, trembling, his whistle lying abandoned in the grass. He had tried to keep control, but now he was just another shaken witness. Investigators began to secure the area, marking evidence on the ground. Broken bottles, blood-stained clothing, and scattered belongings painted a chilling picture of what had happened. The most disturbing discovery came when officers noticed a small pocketknife half buried in the dirt near the 50-yard line. It was smeared with blood, and its presence suggested that someone had carried it with intent. The knife confirmed that this was not simply an uncontrolled brawl, it had escalated into something much darker. As paramedics rushed the injured away, the police prepared for an investigation that would shake the entire community. The football field, once a place of laughter and competition, was now locked down with yellow crime scene tape fluttering in the evening breeze. The nightmare had only deepened, and the truth of how it began was about to unravel. News of the violent outbreak spread faster than the police could clear the field. Within hours, local media descended on the park, broadcasting images of yellow tape stretched across the goalposts and investigators combing the grass for evidence. Reporters spoke in hushed tones about a children's football game that had turned into a crime scene, their voices barely masking the shock that echoed throughout the town. The headline that dominated every channel was grim: "Chaos at Youth Football Game Leaves Community Reeling." Families who had once filled the stands with laughter and encouragement now avoided the park altogether. Unable to look at the field without remembering the blood that stained it, the investigation revealed unsettling truths. Witness statements painted a picture of long-standing hostility between certain families, a rivalry that had been simmering for years and finally boiled over during the game. What many had assumed to be spontaneous rage was found to be something more deliberate. Detectives pieced together text messages and emails exchanged before the match, suggesting that confrontations had been planned under the cover of the sporting event. The discovery of the pocketknife only deepened suspicions, raising the possibility that some had come prepared for violence. In the weeks that followed, arrests shook the community. Several parents faced charges of assault, while others were investigated for more serious crimes linked to the injuries sustained on the field. The man struck by the water cooler never woke from his coma, and his death turned the case from a violent brawl into a homicide investigation. His family, once loyal supporters of the team, stood devastated, demanding justice while grappling with the reality that what should have been an innocent afternoon had stolen a life. The children who had played that day were left with scars that could not be measured in bruises or broken bones. Many struggled to return to sports, haunted by the memory of adults turning their field into a battleground. Parents who had once gathered for community spirit now avoided one another, their trust shattered. The park's football field, once the pride of the town, became a symbol of grief and regret, its grass marked by memories no one wanted to relive. The tragedy stood as a chilling reminder of how quickly anger can destroy everything. A simple game, meant to unite families and teach children teamwork, ended in violence that tore a community apart. What should have been a memory of victory or defeat on the scoreboard became instead a permanent chapter of loss, crime, and chaos that would never be forgotten.